and good afternoon. It's Shirley with Spirit of Matter, and I want to take a look at the timing now for this episode. So we are currently with the ascendant on with the midheaven on the anaretic degree, ascendant on. Is it right now? No. I want to go here. There's another work. So this is actually moon day. It's moon night. It's not Jupiter hour, and we are before sunrise for Venus day. So this is Jupiter hour with Jupiter in the 12th, sextile in Saturn. So Jupiter is sextile in Saturn. The ascendant is on 3 degrees Gemini with Mercury in the first house in 21 degree. Mercury sextile in Chiron. And what I'm actually looking at is that the moon at 25 degrees exactly squaring Algol and is still within the square to Uranus. And the event that I'm going to talk about, so the moon here is in the 3rd house. The midheaven is in Aquarius. Pluto is in the 8th, the midheaven is in the 9th, the descendant is with Jupiter, a descendant ruler in Taurus in the 12th. Yeah, that's about. And the Saturn retrograde in Pisces is in the 10th. So let's see where it takes us. The topic of this episode has to do with an event, and I'm going to just translate to you the Hebrew news. Basically, it was an explosion in a city called Herzliya in Israel. And from the news, the scene reports from around 15 hours ago. So I don't have like the ascendant, but at least I'll have the location of the moon. And what happened is that the entire, well, first of all, the company that was exploded was the factory of TAS, which is basically wait, because this is important. You might, like some of your 401ks may be in it. It's IMI Systems Company, so if you're investing in IMI Systems Company, they're doing arms, they're doing technology for the army and for space. So that's the name of the company. It's IMI Systems, previously Israeli Military Industries, also referred as TAS, an Israeli weapons manufacturer. It manufactured weapon, munitions, and military technology mainly for Israeli security forces. So, and the parent is a daughter company of Elbit Systems, which, of course, like it's Elbit System is one of the biggest, except for Rafael, is one of the biggest companies for weapon stuff. It's international high technology company. Engaged in a wide range of defense, homeland security, and commercial programs. So here is basically career in Hebrew. So without further ado, let's look at the chart. And the chart we have, I kind of went with the hours as far back as I could. Thank you. And that was going, I need another hour back to at least the time when it was reported, and that would be going to where the moon was in 18 degrees, which was on Lilith, applying to conjunct Mars, applying to trine Chiron, and applying to square Uranus. Okay, I'm not going to take a look at the ascendant. It's a Venus ruled ascendant. Here, I don't know, because, when these things get reported, It's not necessarily immediately, and because of the explosion, anybody who lived in the region of Herzliya and Ramat Hasharon, which is center, north center Israel, it's like the northern part of the center, and they were asked to stay in their homes and to close the windows because of the fear of the chemicals that were released during this explosion. This was also part of why I chose to broadcast this, as that's a very interesting event. Rahu is still, and I'm immediately looking at Rahu, it's still in Taurus. So, and the funny thing, I was talking to Catherine Astro, and she was talking about Uranus and Taurus in regards to women's rights, and kind of hoping that the Venus retrograde would bring us, and Venus is in her shade period, would bring us kind of a response to women losing their rights and so on and so. And on that note, I said, I'm more looking at Aries than at Uranus, because Uranus is not triggered by eclipses now. So I don't think this was an eclipse thingy, but I think the moon on the 18th degree, which is a malefic degree according to Nicolas Stoyanovich degree theory, and it probably was about that degree. Even without the 18th degree, it is a moon conjuncting Lilith, okay, that is explosive in herself. Okay, Lilith is explosive in herself. And conjuncting Mars in Leo, while applying to square Uranus. These are all applying aspects. And Uranus was with Vertex. Now, Vertex, I know, is an unpredictable point that can give fated events. Okay, both in the life of a native and probably on the mundane level. So Vertex was conjunct Uranus, and I normally don't say anything about Vertex because Vertex is so unpredictable. But I do think that Vertex contributed to the explosion as the moon was triggering it. I'm trying to look at like the chemicals. Okay, the sun was still squaring Neptune. Because the explosion in itself is obviously that moon Uranus. But people were asked to be closed in their houses due to chemicals that were released in this explosion. And Uranus is explosive, but it wouldn't directly associate it with chemicals. Perhaps there's a Marcy thing yet, because Mars is poison. But chemicals, like particularly chemicals, if it was indeed in this hour, it was Saturn hour in Israel. Saturn actually, the sun is actually applying to trine Saturn. Saturn in Pisces. Well, I was trying to look at Neptune because Neptune can be kind of the release of chemical weapon. Neptune is, we call it medicine, but I was kind of recently thinking about the budget model for healthcare and how people are being sacrificed in the favor of the groups of people for whom certain medication is useful for. I was just kind of thinking about having like an initiation or a fund to have to balance out the financial issue that pertains also to the medical field. But Neptune in general is not just medicine, it's also chemicals. Okay, it's literally chemical weapon, and the association between what is marketed as medicine and chemical weapon, unfortunately, is tremendously high. So, Neptune itself is trining the Lord of Fortune, and the Lord of Fortune is in Jupiter's sign, where Jupiter is in Taurus. I don't know what to say about the Lord of Fortune on a mundane level. Okay, and also the moon is not triggering the Lot of Fortune, so I don't know. Lot of Fortune is usually a lot that you release from in a method called zodiac releasing from a chart of a native, and it gives you fated events. Okay, not necessarily good or bad, it's just something fated is going to happen in the life of the native. But on a mundane level, it is a point, it's a calculated point. I don't know what to say about mundane interpretation of the lots when it's not from a natal chart. It's just this chart, and you would have to, I guess, use like releasing for whatever. Like I don't know. So Neptune is still opposing the Sun. The Sun is the ruler of the Moon, so that can make sense that we have. Um, the Sun is the ruler of the Moon, Venus, Lilith, and Mars stellium in Leo. She's in 0 degree Cancer, so there's this reception between the Sun and the Moon, and the Sun is still squaring Neptune at the time. So it is probably the case that as a result of the explosion, the people, which is a signification of Cancer, are in danger of pollutants. That's Neptune. And so the result of the explosion is the result of the moon applying. Okay, it's not the Neptune doing something with Uranus, but the ruler of the moon basically applying the square Neptune. And this is something that we also, when we look at it magically, we kind of look at these things as well. Um, I had some non-dual experiences that I didn't know how to explain, and there was like a big bombing, this big explosive bombing, and I'm like, well, I'm on my moon days, but I kind of wanted to check the news, and then I saw the news about this huge explosion. So I said, let's look at the chart here and let's see what happens. Is it a part of, because of the involvement of Neptune, I'm kind of looking at, is it a part of what we can expect with Saturn? I don't think so. Saturn had more to do with the other things that we've seen, and I accidentally predicted, which was like in this case, a pack of billionaires visiting the Titanic and drawing. I don't know what happened with that in the end. And all these. And I heard somebody shared that orcas were attacking. I don't know if it was the submarine or like I'm not totally up to speed with that. But definitely for this explosion, I needed to check what it was, and this is what it was. Um, it's one of the biggest events that we had in Israel. Okay, it's a weapon factory exploded, um, affecting the air quality of two cities, big cities around it. I don't know for how long will people have to close their windows, but you understand that it's impossible to do that for long. Um, and it's a company, one of the biggest companies that create weapons specifically for Israel, but not only. And the data company of Elbit. Yes, your 401k might be affected. I don't know what are you invested in. And again, because the companies that you're invested in do not expose their investments, you might not know that you're affected by it, so you have no like transparency. So that can be somewhat effective economically in general. Um, Also pertaining to people's lives. We don't know who did what. Like, this could range from an employee that was fired, and we recently had a case that an employee was fired in another factory. It was not a weapon factory, and he decided to basically like light up the factory. But unfortunately, he did that when people were there. Like, probably it was impossible to do it when people are not there. But he did that during, I think, during the daytime when people were there, and people escaped there. There weren't any deceased people. There's probably very traumatizing, but then people also did not strike upon these, you know, which was also an issue. So we don't know the whole story. Um, but it definitely is not like the laying out people for no reason. It's definitely not something that people should like. It's we the people. It's we the people. When Pluto goes away from Capricorn, it's we the people. And what do we stop the world for? Um, but that was not the case this time. And it can be an employee that did that. It can be guerrilla war, or terror. It can be like, it can be an accident, because the moon is applying to Mars, and Mars also means accidents. So it's not impossible that was accidental. We're highly unlikely to ever know who did what, why. Um, Again, if that was indeed around the time, then we have a Venus ruled ascendant with Venus approaching this moon already in her shade period, um, and Venus ruling this Uranus and Jupiter and Rahu. Uh, yeah, so that's the story. For explosives, we usually look at the outer planet Uranus, and this one's one study case where that can happen. um, Non-dual stuff, channeling, are all outer planets too, not only, but too. Um, the vertex is interesting here because vertex gives us fated events, sudden, which is also Uranus, and that's a pretty local. Okay, Uranus is a pretty local. It's not a 20-year cycle, it's 7-8 years tops in a sign. So it gives us a pretty local timeline, all in all. And this Uranus, oh, what I want you to know about the country of Israel, this Uranus is approaching the sun of the state of Israel, which is conjuncting fixed star Algol. So that explains a lot of Israeli history. And the ascendant was Venus ruled. So this happened indeed if it is indeed Venus ruled ascendant, it happened indeed in Israel, which is ruled by Taurus, which is Taurus sun, I'm sorry. Another Taurus ruled country is Ukraine. I haven't checked the news concerning Ukraine, and maybe it's a time to do so. So let's just do like Ukraine war, Ukraine news. Russia's war in Ukraine live updates. Al Jazeera, I guess, is the closest. Generals like Putin, Wagner boss Wagner. Okay, that's interesting. Um. Oh, okay. Okay. Somebody like Putin over the losses of war in Ukraine. Ukraine's intelligence agencies found that Moscow is considering a terrorist act at the occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. I've had this inner joke that I managed to keep silent for only this while, and it's exposed now. But I said that I actually was thinking about this morning that um, what's happening now with with the nukes is kind of like the Cuba missile crisis, Cuba nuclear crisis, but without John F. Kennedy. And I was actually waking up this morning thinking about this. Lilith is in Leo. So for those of you who do not know, John Kennedy was the president of Cuba. Missile crisis, which happened, I think it was during the Cold War, and Russia was putting Russia, USSR, whichever of the entities it was back then, was putting missiles um, next to the US border in Cuba. So John F. Kennedy managed to tackle this without any bombs exploding. And it's actually something that is studied in politics and governance or political science or whatnot, over and over again, to show how a single person avoided a nuclear crisis by being extremely intelligent. And to be honest, I need to refresh my memory on this. Like, I don't remember exactly what it did, but I was thinking about, I had this nasty thought about Marilyn Monroe being his basically concubine. And I was like, well, since the ability of women to be of good sex is so deprived from women, these nukes are going to explode. And yeah, I know how silly this joke is. That was the thought I woke up with today, as the moon is approaching Lilith in Leo, and just thinking about that. So I don't know what is on with that, but Moscow is considering a terrorist act at the nuclear plant. What terror? Like they want to blow the nukes. Russia, of course, denies the allegations. Not anything we have any chance of knowing what's going on. Like we like again. I first Al Jazeera because it's kind of like, but Al Jazeera could be very well owned by whichever American or Chinese or Russian or Ukrainian. I don't know. Ukrainian forces have struck a bridge linking the Ukraine mainland with Ukraine. The Russia-appointed Kherson governor says, okay, so again, Ukrainian turning to Crimea. Wall Street Journal reporter Ivan Greshkovich loses a new appeal against extended pretrial detention in Russia on spying charges he denies. Okay, so this is a person who is accused of being a spy in favor of Russia. Not in favor of Russia, yeah. In a spy in Russia, okay? So this is a big issue because a lot of the people who expose, think about Edward Snowden. He exposed the fact that the United States is the top spy. Like we use it on modern UN constantly, and I did not even know that it was Snowden that exposed that. The United States is basically the number one top spy on the galaxy. Not the Mossad, not the Shabak, not the KGB, US. And surveilling on its citizens, surveilling on its allies, surveilling on everyone. Yeah, but for now he's out, but it took so freaking long for a country that spies on everyone to release someone they accused in spying. Anyway, Snowden took shelter in Russia. I don't need to proceed from here. What does it mean for spies? What does it mean for the action of exposing and leaking information that is important on a mass scale? Saturn is retrograde here. Neptune is in Pisces, and also both Jupiter and Neptune are associated with Pisces. You want to see rulership, not rulership? Yes, of course. Saturn retrograde in Pisces affects Neptune related stuff, unless you say that Jupiter rules spies, which fine. Anyway, so Russia is hiding bodies of victims of dam breach. Cluster ammunition would be useful for Ukraine, Pentagon says. So these are some pictures of weapons. UN appalled by high number of violations against children in which it's taking part in. Next, Modi says India completely ready to help Ukraine peace. So India is involved. Kiev says Ukrainian forces contain Russian forces in east. Okay, that sounds like ambiguous. 60 billion euros pledged to help Ukraine rebuild. It like the war is not even over yet. Like just okay. Diplomats from Western countries developing economies to meet in Denmark for talks. So here we have Denmark as a country you cannot rely on being an escape in World War, which you could in the two world wars. So yeah. And Ukraine processes to reform unlock membership. So the nuclear thingy has been going on for several, like it has been going on. Planning attack, not planning attack. It hasn't exploded today, fortunately, yet. Hopefully not to be exploded. But Ukraine is also Taurus ruled, and that's why I mentioned it here. I'm not an expert on anything that goes on there. If you anybody who is probably no longer with us, and let's face it. So for the event in Israel, Uranus is approaching the Israeli sun. Okay, it's approaching our goal. It's approaching our goal on a mundane level. Which countries? Now, of course, Israel, unfortunately, is highly affected. Like I said, if you have refugee, like if you absorb refugees from Middle Eastern countries that just want to live and let live, then I pledge. Yeah, so that was, and that would be Saturn hour, which would emphasize Pisces if that was the case. Yet again, alluding to Neptune more than Jupiter, because Jupiter, what was it doing? Jupiter was sextiling this Saturn, but Jupiter is sextiling this, like it's not an explosive. An explosive is Uranus. Just saying. And the chemical stuff is probably with the ruler sun in the moon sign, the ruler of the moon, that triggered the explosion. Squaring Neptune is kind of like spreading, or the danger of spreading chemicals all over. So you see, when those places like big factories are being exposed, exploded, a weapon factory being exploded, the even in supposedly denucleifying something. What is denucleifying? Okay, it means you need to explode something. And then people get hurt also when you like destroy these places, whether on purpose or not. That was the update for right now, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.